The new Congress is setting up committees, switching things around. The formal January 6th committee has ended, although its report and its evidence is still in the hands of investigators. And we ourselves have been going through a lot of that new evidence. You may recall that report dropped just heading into the end of the year. Special Counsel Smith might have Trump's most direct link, though, to elector fraud based on what is newly revealed evidence and newly explained in depth in that report. So I want to get in right now to something that actually comes through. Now, we've had little pieces of this, but as I say, when you get the full report and you get all of the stuff together, well, sometimes a new picture can come into view. This begins with testimony from a very loyal Trump supporter. And here's why we're going to go through it right now. This is the first time we've done it in this level of depth. What you're about to see clearly, factually, bolsters the legal and criminal case against Trump for the Department of Justice. And as I said, it's not from some critic or someone outside of the room. It's from a person in the room, on the calls, direct evidence, no hearsay. A MAGA loyalist, you may recall, Ronna McDaniel, who runs the party. She is chair of the Republican National Committee. And the context goes to what she says happened in her own eyes as a witness, which adds to what the committee has started to reveal, because we first learned about this in some hearings that involve a call from Trump himself.
When I received the call, again, I don't remember the exact date. It was from the White House switchboard, and it was President Trump who had contacted me.
And did President Trump have anyone else on the line with him?
He introduced me to a gentleman named John Eastman.
That's then President Trump making the link directly on the call to Eastman, a coup plotter who had a coup memo and a playbook he circulated. McDaniel says under oath it was Trump who both made the introduction for what would become a request to commit crimes, and Trump listened in.
What did the president say when he called you?
Essentially, he turned the call over to Mr. Eastman, who then proceeded to talk about the importance of the RNC helping the campaign gather these contingent electors in case any of the legal challenges that were ongoing changed the result.
The results didn't change. Her description of it under oath refers to Donald Trump's cover story for what most prosecutors view as a crime, submitting false information, in this case elector material, to the government. It's a type of fraud. It's a crime. It's illegal. Trump was both orchestrating the call, using his power as president to get the RNC chair on the line, and making her talk to his lawyer, who he thought he could help keep this secret because of attorney-client privilege and other abuses. Now, we've heard a lot about hearsay. You may recall some of the most damning testimony, or at least the most dramatic of all the hearings, was often attacked as hearsay. And legally, some, not all of it, was hearsay, meaning a person describing, I'm simplifying, stuff they weren't directly a witness to. Now, none of this is hearsay. This is smoking gun evidence of the person on the call. She is the direct witness listening to the president, taking the call, and getting the play. The play they wanted to run looked like a crime. McDaniel said this was just before December 14th, long after the election. She didn't give an exact date. The Supreme Court had already thrown out the Texas lawsuit contesting the 2020 election, as it did all Trump efforts to get before the court. So you get a picture of intent that's emerging here. And the full January 6th report, which is relatively new, gives this in more detail, how the elector fraud plot first began in early December, around the 7th. Then you have the call to the RNC chair. The report says the team drove the process from start to finish. And then you look at what else was going on in December. On the 13th, a pro-Trump lawyer was circulating a written plan to Giuliani linked to another Trump campaign official and lawyer, Boris Epstein, about this Senate strategy to try to use the elector fraud to somehow launder or justify things that Mike Pence didn't want to do. So while they're honing in on all this, we tried to go to the source, as we always do, and learn about this. And what's striking is, remember, some of these people knew this material was in writing. They knew there were subpoenas. They knew even if they didn't comply, the people who control the email records and the phone call logs were going to hand it over. They did. And so some of them did for whatever reason, start saying in public, knowing this would probably come out, that they were involved in the same related fraud that Trump pitched to the RNC. And some officials, by the way, resisted. Here was that lawyer I mentioned, Epstein, revealing this on The Beat.
I was part of the process to make sure there were alternate electors for when, as we hoped, the challenges to the seated electors would be heard and would be successful per the 12th Amendment of the Constitution and the Electoral Count Act. Everything that was done illegally by the Trump legal team, according to the rules and under the leadership of Rudy Giuliani.
That interview was just about a year ago in January 21. At the time, many people, including independent reporters, wrote up what Epstein said. It made it into articles. People said, why is he saying all this? It wasn't until many months later, October, that the committee started to unveil that they had aspects of this. It's not until now, a year later, in the full report, that we see how it all fits together. A call between Trump himself, Eastman, and the RNC chair. Epstein and Eastman sending emails and memos back and forth, trying to overthrow the election. A memo to Giuliani with the request from Epstein. And then weeks after that call, who shows up and speaks on January 6th? Not because he has some large following online or people there had heard his name, but because he was one of the last diehards that Donald Trump had on the coup plot. That's Eastman on your screen. Then Trump comes up and says this.
John is one of the most brilliant lawyers in the country, and he looked at this and he said, what an absolute disgrace that this could be happening to our Constitution. And he looked at Mike Pence, and I hope Mike is going to do the right thing. I hope so. I hope so. Because if Mike Pence does the right thing, we win the election.
You have to understand it all in context, because that day, even with the horrors viewed, the next day, even at the impeachment trial that ultimately was held, none of the stuff I just briefed you on was in public. And so they had an impeachment trial about a speech. This wasn't no speech. And he wasn't hoping Pence would do the right thing. What we have now in the full January 6th report, backed by the evidence from Republicans under oath, is that he planned, Donald Trump, to go do what Eastman wanted him to do. Get in the car, take the armed guards, the agents, walk through the Capitol with the insurrectionists, create the scene to get Pence to at least say, well, if there's this alternate state of electors, then we got to at least delay. That alone would have thrown more chaos into it. That was the plan. They almost pulled it off. And Donald Trump was along for the whole ride. The committee says he led the plots, and they have the testimony from the RNC chief. The special counsel will need receipts to charge a crime on that kind of premise. You need to prove intent. But they knew that. That's why, again, in the report, we see the reference to deliberate subterfuge. Trump and his aides, even as they made that speech I just showed you, still hadn't publicly said the plan. They wanted complete secrecy to get him to the Capitol, not to create the legitimate ability to win, but to use elector fraud. The call that Trump orchestrated goes to intent. The secrecy goes to the element of surprise. You don't need surprise in court or when you have the votes. You need surprise in battle. The committee says Trump knew Eastman's plot was illegal. And here's what Pence's lawyer said under oath about Eastman.
We had an extended discussion, an hour and a half to 2 hours on January 5th. And when I pressed him on the point, I said, John, if the vice president did what you were asking him to do, we would lose 9-0 in the Supreme Court, wouldn't we? And he initially started it, well, I think maybe you would lose only 7-2. And after some further discussion, acknowledged, well, yeah, you're right, we would lose 9-0.
That's one Republican lawyer describing another Republican lawyer who knew exactly how illegal this was. But that testimony as well was long before it had ever come out that Trump was linked to the election crime by the RNC chief. No hearsay. If you think, well, Ari, you're repeating this point. Yeah, we're repeating this point because it's damning. We have the evidence of a crime in public confirmed by the chief of the RNC and the DOJ, I don't know, interviewing people. Eastman admitted as well he knew what he was doing.
Did Dr. Eastman admit in front of the president that his proposal would violate the Electoral Count Act?
Mr. Eastman acknowledged that that was the case, that even what he viewed as the more politically palatable option would violate several provisions, but he thought that we could do so because, in his view, the Electoral Count Act was unconstitutional.
He knew it was against the law and just added in he doesn't like that law. That ain't how it works. That's Trump's guy. Trump knows his guy thinks the plan is illegal. After Trump hears all about how illegal it is, he has to go find a new set of people. Giuliani even backed off some of the plots that he thought were too far. And after that, Trump makes the call to the RNC chief, pushing Eastman onto the line. And remember, if you just need to introduce two people in government or business, you don't have to personally link the call. Donald Trump had already gathered that there were people who didn't want to go near John Eastman or his illegal plots or his coup, so he had to force the call. Think about that. You're the president of the United States. You tell two people to talk to each other. One of them you install at the RNC. You don't need to link the call. This ain't like the iPhone ad caller. It'd be funny if it wasn't so serious. He had to do that because he'd already found people running from Eastman. And then remember, again, there's more. Dayenu. Eastman tries to get a pardon from Trump. Why? He's a lawyer, Supreme Court clerk, because he knew he did enough that he would need a pardon. This is what the special counsel has on his desk, plus more stuff that might not be public. Evidence, intent, the call. What more do you need?